Welcome to the Solo Mo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Hellway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is August 21st, 2012, and this is episode number 33.
In this episode, we're going to discuss what is SEO and how it affects your web traffic, how SEO is changing in big ways, the rundown of the biggest things that impact your page rank, SEO tips to start doing now, and an overview of WordPress SEO plugin.
Okay, so we got quite the SEO-focused episode ahead of us. I'm excited about it. And Adam, I think this is something you got a little bit of personal expertise in as well, right? Do you do this for clients?
Yes, I do. Do it for clients, and so it'll be fun to kind of talk about things because there's some pretty cool stuff finally happening that kind of gets past the old boring stuff, at least what I considered boring SEO, and gets into the fun stuff of just really thinking about how to create cool content and figure out how to optimize it with all the cool social stuff that's going on. So we'll dive into that in just a little bit.
All right. Well, first we do want to give a quick shout out and a huge thanks to everybody that gave us a rating and review in iTunes this past week. We had a nice spike in ratings and reviews, and really appreciate that. We always say it every episode, but it is really something that helps us to promote the show, and it's kind of the one thing that we ask of the audience. So we appreciate those of you that have gone to iTunes and done a rating and review of the show, and if you're not on that list, if you haven't had a chance to rate the show inside of iTunes, we encourage you to do so. We would love additional ratings and reviews, so keep them coming. All right, and with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, let's dive right into our infographic or statistic of the week. How's that sound?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. So this was actually a presentation given by a couple of really, kind of the top thought leaders in the SEO industry called The State of SEO and Internet Marketing in 2012. So with a title like that, it's pretty much going to be the go-to source for a lot of really quality SEO information.
And the folks, the authors are Rand Fishkin, who's the CEO of SEO Moz, and Dharmesh Shah, who is the CTO of HubSpot. They did this presentation just a few days ago.
Yeah, exactly. And SEO Moz, HubSpot, both really quality online sources for SEO information and SEO tools. They've been around for quite a while. They're not some, brand new upstart in the industry. They've kind of proven themselves over time. And so a lot of this data is definitely based on expertise, and it's not just them kind of making up statistics to prove their case. They're really looking at the data and trying to find information that's going to help others make the most of their SEO efforts as well. So a lot of the data that they shared was actually based on a industry survey that they did about the SEO industry, and they surveyed over 4,000 people. They had 4,400 survey respondents. So really solid numbers. And, I think past a certain point, the numbers even out, and it's like if you survey 1,000, it's pretty much the same results as if you survey 4,000. But hey, they took that extra step. They did 4,400 survey respondents. So the numbers that they shared are, definitely trustworthy, definitely worthy of putting some faith into. So I thought it was interesting. And Adam, you had a couple of statistics that you pulled out around searches per day and how those break out organic versus paid. Maybe you could walk us through that real quick.
Yeah, and these are related to general information, but they're really up to date. I mean, they're from August. So what I mean by that is previously, and we even talked about this when we were taking a look at searches per day. And some old data that we looked at, that there was 2 billion searches per day happening on Google. And most of this stuff focuses around Google because Google has the vast majority of the search market. But now they're up to 3 billion searches per day. And my little side note on that, based on things that we've discussed in the past, is that mobile searches are on the increase. And those are a little of everything. They're general searches, but they're also what they call in-time searches, meaning in-time information, that they're looking for something some piece of information they need right then and there. And then a significant chunk of those are also location-based searches based off of finding a place or a service provider, restaurant, whatever it may be within the area that you're in. So it's based on the proximity, the location of where you are. That still, and I say still because this is a statistic that's been around for a long time, 75% of searches of people who are searching on something like Google are engaging with a result that is within the organic side of the page. So for those that don't understand organic and paid, you've got up on the top, you've got up down the right, and sometimes in other areas you have paid advertising, page search results. People are paying for their advertisement, for their search result to be placed there. And still, roughly only about 25% of the people are engaging with those paid ads, which means that organic is still getting the vast majority of interactions from people who are searching for content.
Was that number higher or lower than you would have expected? You seem, sort of surprised that paid ads were as much as 25%. That number actually seemed high for me. I was surprised that 1 in 4 search results actually results in somebody clicking on an ad versus an organic piece of content. And it's probably a little bit of selection bias. I know that when I'm searching Google, I never click on an ad. I always click on an organic result. And so I guess, it sort of surprised me that a lot of people are actually clicking on ads. 1 in 4, that's no number to sneeze at. Was that higher or lower than you would have expected?
Well, it's actually about the same, and that's the thing that I think is pretty cool. It's give or take another 5%. In the past years, it's been around at the 70% mark, is what they've always said for organic search. Around people engaging with organic search results has been right around 70%. So 5% give or take. That's not a huge jump, but it's still staying steady. But I agree with you. I mean, I myself don't click on any ads. And I see, there's probably still a good number of people, considering how many searches are happening on a daily basis and how many people still rely on Google as almost in a way their web browser. I mean, they use Google as the way to find a site that they've been to every single day. They go to Google and then they search for Facebook, right? And we've talked about those sorts of things before. So there's likely a number of people who don't have a high level of sophistication when it comes to how they're using the search engines, and therefore are fine with where the ads are placed in the information that's there.
So one of the other things that we'll link to, and as we mentioned, there was a presentation and there was also a survey. So inside of the SEO survey specifically, they shared some interesting results, and some of the ones that I found most interesting was around the tools being used by people in the SEO industry. And so just to run through a couple of those real quick, they actually looked at analytics tools. So the percentage of respondents that were using various analytics tools, at 93%, Google Analytics far and away just dominates the analytics space right now. The closest, the second place result was a mere 16% using WordPress stats, and that's using the internal WordPress stats. So people running blogs, they check those stats, which it's kind of built into WordPress. So WordPress gets some default usage. Really, if you're picking your own tool, people are just using Google Analytics. It's the default, it's the go-to. In terms of keyword research tools, so these are tools that are actually helping people to optimize their SEO. The numbers are a little more spread out, but still, number 1 and number 2 were both owned by Google. So 88% of people doing keyword research are doing so through Google AdWords, and 58% are doing so through Google Insights. So a lot of Google tools across the board here. And then in third place, 20% using a tool that I've actually never heard of, but it's called SEMrush. And so again, Google kind of leading the way here. And then another category that, yet again, Google is the top of is the top 5 conversion rate optimization and usability tools. So you've put a site out there. How do you get people to, make sure that site is working as you intended it to? With 73% of respondents, Google Website Optimizer is the top conversion rate optimization tool. And again, a huge jump down to second place with Crazy Egg at 18%. So 73% using a Google tool, 18% using Crazy Egg. I was actually a little surprised. I think that, I understood that Google was sort of the leader in a lot of these SEO tools. And I think what's happening is Google's playing both sides of the coin here. They are the ones serving the ad results, but then they're also showing people the insight into how those results are being ranked. And so people are saying, well, hey, if I want to make sure that I'm ranked well inside of Google, I'll use the tools Google gives me to understand that data. So, I think it makes sense that Google's on top, but it was sort of surprising to see there aren't really strong second place tools here. It's really, there's the leader and then everybody else kind of shares the scraps that remain.
Well, and part of the reason being is because all the Google tools are free.
Very true.
Right. And so as soon as you jump to some of those that you named, so Crazy Egg, I believe also SEM Rush, when you really dive into those tools cost some money. And so a majority of folks are using what they feel is kind of getting the accurate information straight from the horse's mouth, which is directly from Google, and Google makes those tools available and so on. And so that's what I would attribute it to.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it's, interesting that they're free now, but a lot of times Google has purchased what used to be a paid tool, made it free, and it sort of crushed that industry, because how do you compete against something that has the financial backing of Google and the users of Google and the data of Google that's also happens to be free? They did do a section that talked about paid versus free tools, and so they said within the paid tools, the percentage of respondents that are actually using paid tools, the highest paid tool was SEO Moz, who is actually putting out this study coincidentally. But 55% of respondents reported using SEO Moz and Open Site Explorer. So definitely strong usage. And, I think it makes sense. For a paid tool, it is a very good paid tool. It helps to make sense of a lot of this data. And then in second place with 17% was Majestic SEO. Third place, 17% again, was Raven. And then in fourth place with 13% was that tool we mentioned previously, SEM Rush. And so, again, people are using the tools, but there seems to be a very clear leader in the paid tool space with the SEO Moz tools. So interesting data. There's a lot more in that study. We encourage you to check that out. We'll include links in the show notes, which are going to be available at solomoshow.com. But lots of great data, and we're excited to actually dive into the world of SEM a little more beyond the data and talk about how you can make the most of it and how you can actually optimize your own content to appear inside of Google. So, Adam, I think one of the reasons we wanted to really talk about this is SEO is changing a lot and changing in big ways. So maybe you can walk us through a couple of those recent changes or some of the bigger changes and how that's starting to affect the way that companies need to think about search and how they need to optimize their own efforts to make sure it's showing up when somebody's searching for their types of content.
Yeah, and just as you started to touch on there, just to take a quick step in the direction of explaining to those out there who don't know what SEO is, just really quickly, SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization, and it's pretty much about optimizing your content, your web page, your website in order to be found when people search for information that's somewhat related or related to your particular content. And so there are great ways to do this, and there are really bad ways to do this. And if your content is relevant, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be optimizing your content to make it easier for search engines to understand what that content is and therefore provide it to folks who are still searching. We talked about there being 3 billion searches per day, so that there's obviously people who are still using search engines and increasingly using search engines in order to find content. And I think that's kind of part of what I wanted to communicate here, is that there's always a discussion about whether search is dying and that social media is destroying it, and search and SEO specifically is going away. And that's definitely a myth as far as I'm concerned. I think it's definitely evolving. And so that's what we'll touch on right now. A few of the ways that search is changing and how it's impacting your ranking. I'm going to go down kind of a list because there's quite a bit of things here, and we'll touch on things. And Corey, dive in and kind of ask me questions or shoot, interject something into here. But the first one I wanted to just talk about was social signals. And so where there was a lot of link building going on before, where Google predominantly took a look at your content, decided what it was relevant for, and then went ahead and ranked your content based on both its relevancy and based on kind of what you would consider endorsements, which were backlinks from other people's websites. And so in the past, way back in the day, you could stuff keywords and you could do all kinds of things where you were putting stuff in your content that wasn't relevant, but in an effort to drive more traffic to your site. And nowadays you can't do that. so they made it more kind of a, anybody can game the system internally, but it's very hard to actually game the system when what you rely on is endorsements from third-party people, from people outside of your website. And so that's what backlinks were for, where somebody would find your content relevant, they would link back to your site. The accumulation of those links and the actual rank and content that those folks who were linking to you had would kind of in a way trickle and provide a rank for that particular page that they were linking to, and therefore all those pages together became, your website. So people would practice what was called link building a lot, where they would try to get people to link to your website as a signal to Google and other search engines that they were endorsing your site. And nowadays, Google is actually they're still using that, but they're diminishing the power of that a little bit more and actually relying more on social signals, essentially link backs within social media, things like mentions on Twitter, things on Facebook, and other areas as a way to identify endorsements externally from people out on the social web.
And one interesting effect of this, I think, is that there's a shift in the type of content that's going to work well in this environment. So when all you're doing is looking for links out in the internet that are pointing to your website, you can create more long-term content. You can have, your main.com website or a landing page, and over time build links to that and say, hey, I'm reaching out to all these people, I'm asking them to link, or I'm doing a little bit of PR to build these inbound links. But with social signals, it's really, not a lot of people share on Twitter a link to the .com for a website. They'll share a link to a blog post or an image they see or a video. It's deeper content and it's more recent content. And so I think it's forcing companies to kind of rethink their strategy and say, okay, well, a blog suddenly has much more value because every time we put out a new post, people are going to share that on Twitter and on Google Plus and on Facebook. And that's all going to drive a lot of this social signal that we weren't getting previously through just website links. So, I think it's shifting towards a more real-time and a more consistently updated web versus just creating a big static page that aggregates thousands of links over months and months and months. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's been affected a lot by the fact that Google itself couldn't index content fast enough in the past, and now it can. It can do it very, very quickly. And so that speed that you're kind of talking about and the freshness of content, it doesn't mean that people have to just be, oh my gosh, every hour we have to publish something in order to be fresh. It just means that your content that you publish today can have an impact within the same day, and especially when it's being actually shared and there's a discussion happening around it. In the past, that was much harder for Google to do accurately. And speaking of Google and social signals, they're finding that +1s to a particular page on your website and Google Plus followers associated with a brand page that's connected to your website have an actual positive impact, almost in a way a more positive impact than a lot of other social media related activity in increasing the ranking of your site and of pages on your site specifically. We talked about this a bit because there was an infographic here that I've linked to, and we'll put it in the show notes. But Cora, we talked about this in the past about going through a number of these social media related website, and it was pretty obvious again that Google was leaning far in their own direction in regards to the impact that Google Plus was having on the uplift in page rank.
Yeah, and I think that again it's kind of interesting because Google has to play both sides here. They have to say, all right, well, we are ranking your content based on social signals, but we also own a channel that creates social signals, and hey, so wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If you use our channel actively, we may help you out on this very valuable search result page. And so it does feel a little, conflict of interest on Google's behalf where, hey, they're, of course, the more +1s and the more Google Plus activity, the higher they're going to rank. They're kind of using that as a carrot and saying, all right, search engine marketers, if you can drive a little bit of extra traffic to our Google Plus channel here, we'll reward you. And so, of course, the SEO industry has responded, and they've recommended Google Plus as a way of boosting your search results. And we've even talked about it on the show here and saying, hey, at the very least, pay attention to Google Plus if for no other reason than to help yourself out inside of search results. So, I think that yet again, just to kind of reiterate that fact that make sure you don't ignore Google Plus, because Google is certainly not ignoring it. And so there's a lot of value to even just aggregating a couple of folks in there and starting to build these plus ones and starting to build momentum inside of your Google Plus page.
Yeah, and it's not that you necessarily even have to, if you don't have time, have a Google Plus brand page. Although I think that you should investigate into that, but at least the plus ones, having plus ones on your page, which is something that they can do on search results. So if they find something they want a plus one, but far less people, I believe, actually do that on their search results. Versus maybe in your content. You were talking, Corey, about blog posts. So, for instance, if you have blog posts or if you have pieces of content like white papers and things, if you can have a plus one button right next to it so that people can say, hey, this is really awesome, just like you would actually have a like button for Facebook. The difference is that Facebook isn't found in search rankings. Your Facebook content, if somebody likes it more, it's not necessarily more visible in Google search rankings, but obviously a plus one related to Google and tied directly to Google's data is. The next thing here that I have that people don't actually know that much about, and I'm interested to know if you've checked it out, Corey, and what you've thought about it, is something called Google's Authorship Markup. And what the Authorship Markup is, it's essentially a little piece of code and a few links, and you basically set it up in a way that Google now knows not only what website a piece of content is on, but it knows it's like doing people ranking. It knows who the author is of the content and actually starts within search results to, in a way, rank content based on authors that it believes have expertise in a certain area and that have produced great content. And it starts to actually take your Google Plus profile, so it would be yours or mine personally, and show our faces next to the content directly within search results. And this has kind of been, I don't know, about a year in the making, and they've continued to kind of push this out there a little bit more, but not a lot of people are doing this. And I think this is going to be quite interesting in the future, where now they can take a look at some content, for instance, that I publish, I write, and they can tie in, if it's set up correctly, they can tie my personal profile and my face onto search results for content that I've written across the entire web, not just on Solomotion or Secret Sushi or Social Media Explorer. And so in the future, there's a huge possibility to have what would be considered like influencer ranking via Google's profiles and in your content based on, again, all these other things that are happening with people endorsing content with plus ones and links and so on, but very centralized around individual people. Have you ever checked out your own face right there in a search result, Corey?
I have, and it's interesting. Authorship Markup has kind of evolved, and so it was one of those things where people started to notice it inside of Google results and thought to themselves, well, that's kind of cool, but how is this happening? How do I make that happen for myself? And so I did actually dive in a little while ago, and it used to be pretty challenging, actually, to set this up correctly. You used to have to link, each blog post that you wrote had to have a byline, and that byline had to link to an About Me page, and an About Me page had to link to your Google Plus profile with this right bit of code, and when all was said and done, there really wasn't a way of testing it even. So you'd sort of set this up, and then you'd wait, and then a week later you'd do some searches, and maybe your photo shows up, and maybe it doesn't. There's no way of Google sending you a little email and saying, hey, we've got you set up and you're good to go. It was very much like, will it work, won't it work? They've definitely streamlined the process now, so you can essentially verify websites that you own through your Google Plus page, and we'll include a link that'll talk about this a little more in depth, because there's a lot that goes into it, and so we can't really cover all of the specifics and details on the show here. But one of the things that I've actually set up for myself is for the future of ads. So I mentioned in the intro of each episode, I'm not sure if people have even had a chance to check it out, but I do write a blog focused on advertising called thefutureofads.com. And so part of this is I wanted to just set it up to see what the process was like and how hard it was to actually get these authorship code up and running and working. So it's actually running right now for Future of Ads. If you take one of the blog posts, put that into Google, when it shows up in the Google results, my face should, hopefully, if it's still working correctly, show up next to that blog post. And The big benefit, the huge benefit to this is that it makes your results stand out. So if you've got a Google search result page, there's 10 results on that page, everything looks the same. It's a link, a title, and a little bit of text. But if you're the one link on that page that has a person's face smiling back at the person doing the searches, that's going to be the first thing they look at. So I think there's a lot of value to sites for setting this up, getting it tested, making sure it works, and then hopefully reaping some of the free benefits of being one of the only things inside of a Google search result that has an image associated with it, and especially an image of a person, which we know people are sort of drawn to. They're drawn to faces and looking at them, and that's going to make them more likely to click on your result compared to other results.
And even beyond just the fact that it has a face there, I think that it also ties the Google plus your world to it, which means that if the person, for instance, is somehow connected to you socially on a social network, that will actually also make that person's content rank higher in the page. So I'd pay attention to it. I mean, I actually think that in the future it could turn into a really interesting, almost in a way, Google-based clout for the web based on content. And in a lot of ways, it's actually more important than clout, kind of, because if it means that your content in the real world, in the business sense, is going to get viewed more by people because you have a higher authority, right? We're talking page rank for pages, and now we're talking like people rank in a way for authors. I think that that's actually there could be some pretty dramatic things to happen 3 or 4 years down the road if Google doesn't pull the trigger soon, because like you said, it's changed quite a bit, but it's been. Thing also to pay attention to is ratio of repeated content versus original content. So Google has done a couple changes to their algorithm, and they've kind of swept through some of their results, and they've done some cleaning up. And that you might have heard of something called Google Penguin Update and Google Panda Update. And those were essentially updates that they had that kind of swept across all of Google's search index, and adjusted things here and there, and really only impacted a small percentage of their search results, but enough people are in their search index that even 1%, 2%, 3% is a significant number of sites out there, and that pretty much had to do with the quality of content and duplicate content. And so that's very much related to kind of this ratio of repeated content versus original content, which is connected to the quality of it. When somebody comes to your site, there are a lot of pages that people were building these content farms where this little tiny spot right in the middle would have like the article, but then all across the entire site, it was the same repeated thing of either ads on the side and links to other content in the website. And of course, their header and their footer and their navigation. And so if you were to go page to page to page, you might find that, I don't know, 25% or 30% of the overall site actually was different from page to page. And Google really starts to frown upon this now, and they want you to have a higher ratio. The ratio that I had heard was that over 50% of the site needs to be unique. I'm not sure if that's indeed the case, but I remember hearing a very reliable source talk about that at least 50% or more should be unique content. What that means is paying attention to how many ads you have on the page in comparison to the content that you actually have on the page. If you happen to be a site that tries to really drive a lot of advertising on it, and people to, you're paying the dues, you're paying money off of people clicking on those ads. But also overall, because people are using a lot of template-based systems and templated websites, overall, how much fresh content is really filling up the space of a site that's templated with tons and tons of repeated content. You just want to take a look at that and really try to make the content stand out more and allow more room for that content to be there instead of all this repeated stuff across your entire site.
And I think my takeaway when I saw the Penguin and saw the Panda updates go live is it's really rewarding people for using the web the way it was intended. And so there was this time when everybody was, really trying to game the Google system and create content and just stuff it with keywords and write sentences that didn't really make sense in English, but hey, they had a bunch of keywords, and so it was boosting you up in Google search results. And Google caught on to that, and they were like, all right, we get this. You guys are trying to game the system, so we're going to push back on that a little bit, and we're going to start to reward blogs that are writing for people, blogs that are writing to be understood by actual human beings, not just the Google robots. And so, I think the takeaway for this, it's sort of intimidating. If you're looking at this, you're like, well, I don't understand, what's quality, what's not, what's duplicate, what's not. Just write the way you would actually write. Don't try to optimize too heavily for Google. Yes, there's things you can do to improve the word choices or, include a couple of extra keywords, but don't just write every single keyword you can into a paragraph to the point where it doesn't make sense to actual people, because Google has figured out a way of sorting that content and saying, all right, I get what you're doing here. I'm going to bump you down a little bit, and I'm going to reward
right for
those
human beings, right?
Right
for human beings.
Exactly.
And just like what you're talking about, that's the thing which I think is really awesome about some of these changes that Google has made, is that now they're moving in the direction of taking what once was very kind of mechanical and robotic and everything with their page ranking, and find a way to move it more in the direction of what actual human beings would want from content, and ranking that content higher up in their search ranking, which forces all these people who would follow the SEO experts to say, well, you've got to do this, that, and the other. And it's all very technical stuff that's really kind of in a way gaming the technology behind Google. And Google's now saying, if you really want to game our system right now, it's about making this content work for human beings and making it of value for folks. So the next thing I have here on the list is actually the page speed. So Google is now taking a look at sites that have slower sites versus faster sites, and they're saying, look, if your site's slow, significantly slow, we're going to rank you down. Even if your content is as good as the next guy, they're going to put you a little bit lower on the list. And so Google has an actual tool out there that you could use in order to test this and see what they think about it. And it gives you a whole slew of technical recommendations on how you can improve your page speed for your site. You can send it to your web developer, your IT team. And so if you Google it, and we're going to end up putting it on our show notes anyways, but if you just go to just Google speed page, or page speed check is what it is. Sorry, I'm seeing this URL with all kinds of words in here. But if you check that out, you just put the URL of the website in, it will do the test, it will tell you what it thinks, and you'll get a lot of feedback on how to improve the page speed of your site.
Yeah, and this is interesting because we just said, hey, Penguin and Panda, these are updates designed to prevent people from optimizing for the Google robots. This is a case where they're actually encouraging you to optimize for the Google robots. So this is nothing to do with your content, everything to do with the actual code underlying your site. And the more you can do to speed it up, the better Google is going to treat your results, because they know that people, if they're serving a result in their search results that somebody clicks and then it takes 10 seconds for that page to load, that's going to piss people off, and that's going to make them devalue the results they find in Google. And so Google is rewarding sites that have done things to boost up the page speed. And this was actually one of the big takeaways I had from WordCamp a couple weeks ago. A lot of the WordCamp sessions were talking about how to speed up your blogs, and a lot of that has to do with caching. So if you run your site through this Google page speed checker, you'll notice that a lot of the what they call high priority things to check against is to make sure your site is cached. So make sure you're not pinging, a complicated series of databases, and this blog is having to put the page together fresh every time. If it's the same page that was just served to somebody else, your server can actually cache that, which speeds up your page tremendously. And so, I think this page speed, I actually ran a couple of my own sites through it. It definitely gives a lot of useful feedback. There are things that you can immediately take action against that will drastically speed up your page. It'll actually tell you how much faster your page gets. On the same token, there are things that, I put in my website and it said, hey, in order to increase your page speed, try these 3 things. And I was like, I don't even understand what that's saying. So, there's things that the average person can take advantage of. There are things that you're going to need to engage the help of somebody that knows a little more about configuring a server or diving into actual code. But it's not something to be intimidated by. There are likely recommendations that you yourself can implement in order to speed up your page. And the other thing to note is it actually compares both desktop and mobile. And so it's starting to look at when a person visits your page on a mobile phone, are they served, smaller assets and simpler code in order to make sure that Google's search results for the phone are optimized as well. So that's something that you should also be paying attention to. You know, again, you can't ignore that mobile user. It's increasingly important, and Google is recognizing that, and so it's trying to help you speed up your mobile page as well.
And so the next thing I've got here is that, are your results appetizing? Now that sounds really weird, but taking a look at when you have search results come up for any page on your site, because remember, search results are not for, you know, when you do SEO, it's not that you should be targeting sending people directly to your homepage. Every single page on your site, every single blog post that you publish is a doorway into your website. And that's why publishing content is so great, especially optimized content that you have the intention of providing a value and providing significant, valuable, and relevant content within the body of each of those pages, because every one of those pages gets looked at and indexed by Google. And so therefore, when somebody's looking for very specific words or terms that are just only a small portion of maybe what you provide, or something that's related to one post in your blog, not the entire blog, they might find your site, find your service, learn a little bit more about you because they found that one particular post or that one particular page on your site in a search result. And so when you're targeting specific pages and you want to see what people see when they search with when they see those particular pages pop up in search results, you want to take a look and say, is what they see here appetizing to them? Is it attractive to them when they look at this? Does that main blue, bolded text right there with the black couple sentences of the description under it, does it actually sound like the content that they'll find when they go and click on that link? Does it sound like it's relevant and it's appropriate and it's accessible? Or is it just say something like, for instance, if it was the Solo Mo show, and I hope that ours isn't set up this way because I don't remember if I've looked at it, but if every single page on our website shows up in a search result and just simply says Solo Mo Show podcast, and that's all the link says, and then the description is the same every time, but somebody's actually looking for our advertising page versus our About Us page or versus our live page. Each of those pages can be optimized differently and have different what would be considered title tags, which is the big blue text that shows up in a search result, and then description tags. These are meta tags that are within the page the page code. And Corey will talk a little bit about a plugin, for instance, in WordPress that actually helps you tweak that. But normally in your content management system, or somebody from your IT department or your SEO team or whoever would go in and actually tailor these individually so that when somebody sees them in a search result, they look appetizing and appealing, and that they make sense, so that when somebody clicks, what they expected to find when they clicked on those results is what they in fact find. And so it's about making, again, those human beings happy when they get over there. And those are some actually really highly sensitive areas of your site, so you should be paying attention to title tags and such anyways.
All right, Adam, I'm ready to make some appetizing content. What are good examples of content types that I could be creating for my business, for my product, to actually help myself out in terms of SEO? Do you have any good examples of content types?
Yeah, so in some of the stuff that we talked about with the survey, and they'll be able to take a look at that, people were talking about the types of content that they create even. And this is what I tell most of my clients, is that the bottom line is I'm completely it's going to sound funny, I'm totally giddy over blog posts and blogs, okay? Because blogs are awesome. When you create websites, you usually develop websites and maybe a page changes here or there every, few months, maybe every 6 months to a year. I mean, how often do you update your website? Most people don't do it that often. And if you're going to do something like a campaign or you have a new service, you might add that section to the website. But a blog post provides fresh content often, and can often take like a service or a product offering that you have or a vertical that you work within, and even dice it up further into some smaller topics that you want to cover and show that you have some thought leadership on and some knowledge about. So blog posts are awesome. Anything really that's related to producing written text is what search engines gravitate towards the most. That's why people have moved away quite a bit from doing sites in Flash. At least that's what, don't do Flash for your website. If it's important for it to be indexed by a search engine, do not use Flash. You might use it in some areas here and there to do a video or something like that, or have a product tour. But if you want it to be visible to a search engine, it must be HTML, and it must be proper HTML as well. And so you'll have to, talk with your SEO person about that. It's a whole nother topic of how to semantically make sure that the meaning in your code is applied to the content and works well with search engines. Google does actually index PDFs. So you can actually, you create the PDF, but make sure that the PDF is actually of written text converted to a PDF and not like an image with text in it and then it's converted to a PDF, because that's the same as basically just having an image. It's the difference between having live text on your website versus taking a photo of a piece of paper and that text is just basically locked into an image. So things like white papers and catalogs and other things like that are good things. Any sort of articles that you might have or resources on your website where you break things down a little bit more. Again, anything with text is really awesome. You could have images as well from time to time, but really images are better to kind of augment content that you currently have on your page. And you always want to pay attention to alt tags, which is essentially like writing text to represent what that image is. So I've seen a lot of people who will go ahead and have multiple images on the page, and those images are very, very relevant to the content. They're not just some smiling person for the sake of marketing. They're actually relevant images for the type of whatever they're talking about at that particular time, whether it be a blog post or on their website. And they miss out on taking advantage of just setting up those alt tags and putting a brief. And I mean brief. Don't put a big long sentence. Put a short caption with relevant information that is related to that product or service or topic that you're talking about on that page in there, and you'll be surprised at the difference that it will make. And then lastly, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned a lot of text, but what about video? That's especially relevant to this show, since I think every blog post that we write on the Solomo Show website has a YouTube video in it. So does video count? Is that important, or should we really be focused on text only?
So video on its own doesn't count. Video on its own doesn't actually. It's not searchable well. I think they're starting to work on that problem more and more. Google is, because YouTube is obviously a Google property, and it's the second largest search engine. But the reason people can search for content is because you do what you would do for a website with your videos. You do tags, you do titles, you do descriptions. And so when you label your videos correctly and you title them and you put the right descriptions, it makes it easier for the average human being to find content there. So if you were to take a video and embed it into one of your own web pages, that's not going to make a whole heck of a lot of difference. That content itself is not going to be indexed if there's nothing more than just the embed code within the body of your page. But on YouTube itself, it definitely is searchable and findable. And so you might want to think about the type of things, the type of content that folks are currently publishing related to your industry or market, and see what sort of content is up there and the kind of views that it has and so on. And maybe you want to publish some content as well. Just think of it as people finding you on YouTube and potentially being aware of you, and even in clicking and coming back to your website, rather than the fact that video is just, and it has an SEO benefit directly on your site.
All right. Well, that is quite a thorough background on SEO, the current state of SEO, a little bit about what you should be considering. And we're actually going to return in a little bit to some specific tips that you can use as takeaways. So we've hopefully kind of inspired you to think about, all right, maybe I should be paying attention to SEO. So later on in the episode, we're going to talk about some quick things that you can do to get yourself more familiar and actually start to take steps to optimize your own search results. But first, I think we're going to dive into a quick tool review. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
All right. So the tool that we're going to look at today, and we'll include a link to this in the show notes, is called WordPress SEO by Yoast. And it's, I believe, pronounced like toast, but spelled with a Y. So WordPress SEO by Yoast. And part of why we wanted to talk about it is this is actually the SEO plugin that the Solomo Show uses. So when we were setting up our WordPress blog system to actually host the show, there's a couple of different kind of leading SEO plugins. One is the WordPress SEO by Yoast. The other big competitor is All-in-One SEO Pack. And to be honest, I think they're both pretty solid options. I think that there's some people that'll swear by one, some people that will swear by the other. It's hard to go wrong with either. I think that, find one that works for
Yoast. I used to use All-in-One SEO, but I've definitely moved in the direction of Yoast.
So, I think there's going to be preferences. I would say find the one that works for you. Find the one that has menus that you understand or, talks about it in a way that you understand. But we've gone with WordPress SEO by Yoast, so of course we can, kind of give that our stamp of approval. One thing that I really like about it is it has easy social integration. And so if you're looking at things like Facebook Open Graph and saying, how do I code my websites so that it shows up properly in Facebook, or when somebody goes to pin it, it knows what image to grab, and, all right, it's kind of working in Facebook, but now how the heck does this Google Plus thing work? WordPress SEO is actually going to take care of a lot of that for you. So you go right in and you can designate what image you want these social sites to pull from. And you can say to it, all right, when somebody shares it on Facebook, here's the text to grab with it. Or when somebody shares it on Google Plus, use this copy. It's going to be slightly different than what we want on Facebook because we know there's more room in Google Plus than there is in a Facebook update. So it lets you control a lot of the social integration, which I really like. The other thing that's really nice about the tool is a lot of it is automatic. So you go through and you've written your blog post, you've got your title, you've got your keywords in there. You basically tell it what you want to focus on. So let's say for this episode, for example, SEO is obviously the big keyword that we want to focus on. So you put SEO in there, click Analyze, and it's going to run a couple of things for you and say, all right, you're looking good because the title has SEO in it, but the URL that you're using for this page doesn't have SEO. So check that. Make sure the URL includes SEO. And it's great that the description for this page has SEO once, but if you could include it once more, that would be even better. And so it starts to give you really actionable recommendations, and it does so, it kind of creates a score for you. So at the end of it, you can feel confident knowing, all right, I've done all the things that it said to do. It's saying, we're good to go. I'm seeing a lot of green here. Let's click the publish button. And so I like that aspect of it. It's very similar to
another plugin that we covered not too long ago, right?
Which plugin's that?
The Scribe SEO.
Scribe SEO, yes. So I haven't used Scribe SEO, but if you say so, I'll take your word for it.
No, all the scoring mechanism here, for me, when it comes to Yoast, and I think they've added this stuff fairly recently. It says right here that they've updated it on the 16th, which is only a few days ago. Yoast, but Scribe SEO does just that. It's really primarily for analyzing content and scoring it, where that's what Yoast is doing to some extent as well. I don't know in comparison to Scribe, but they also have a number. Scribe actually, it works in conjunction with Yoast because Yoast itself is what cracks open the fields to allow folks to actually tweak their content and plug stuff in. Scribe by itself doesn't actually do that.
Good to know. And one other thing to note is that WordPress by itself is kind of SEO optimized, and there is a little bit of an argument of is that enough? Do you really need some of these tools? I find that it helps, and especially things that we mentioned, the social integration isn't something that WordPress does really well out of the box right now. So I do recommend checking one of these out. If you're the type of person that really wants to be hands off and you just want it to function, WordPress probably has a lot built in that's going to help you out. But if you want to take it to that next level, if you really want to know that everything is working the hardest that it possibly can, I definitely recommend checking out WordPress SEO by Yoast. And hey, what other recommendation do you need? Then we're using it on our own site, so check it out.
Couldn't have said more.
You know what time it is then, Adam?
Thunder and
lightning round.
Oh, lightning. All right. You got some cool stuff going on this week with the lightning round.
We do. So I actually realized I don't have my phone on me, and the phone is what I normally use to do.
You got your Swatch or something over there? What is the beeping going on?
We got a little Nike watch here. I think it does stopwatch. So I'm going to see if I can set. No, it only does up. So I've actually pulled up a website that'll do a 1-minute countdown. The thing we're going to miss out on is the alarm. So I will
want me to do it?
Sound an alarm. I like that even better. Let's let Adam do it. All right.
Okay.
So I'll let you do the timing, and I will actually dive into the first story if you want to go ahead and do that. So give me a countdown, let me know when to start, and we'll dive right in.
Go for it.
All right, so the first story is called Changes Coming in version 1.1 of the Twitter API. This is a blog post that Twitter put out on their development site that really has sent some pretty big waves into the developer community. What they're essentially saying is they're putting a lot of restrictions on the Twitter API for how third-party developers can use and actually present tweets in the system. And really what they're trying to do is solidify their platform, make it look the same across all of their different channels, specifically so that they can monetize it and put ads into it and make sure those ads are showing up in all the places that people are accessing Twitter. It's definitely pushing some of the developers away. So there is, some of these bigger developers are saying, hey, we're going to continue developing for Twitter. We're not going anywhere. Have no fear. But I think there is the risk that this starts to push these third-party developers away. And, that could sort of slow down the growth that the Twitter system has had recently.
Oh, there's no sound, is there?
I heard it. I can hear it a little bit.
Okay, I guess I got the headphones on so I can't hear it. All right.
60 seconds back on the clock. What's your take on the recent Twitter changes, Adam?
So there was a really interesting post out there by Janet Fouts on this, and I really I wish that I would have grabbed that and added it here to the lightning round for this. But essentially, a little bit more on this in this case is that they're going to reduce what they call the API call limits, the rate limits for the third party folks. So what that means is each application has a certain amount of times that it can reach out and try to grab information from Twitter via the API. And it looked like the number was going to be reduced by down to 25% of what it was previously, which is quite a significant amount. And what that means is that it's going to impact the third-party applications to a point where they're not going to be able to be as quick to refresh information and pull data and so on, and they're going to have to restructure things a little bit in that sense. And so it may actually make third-party apps seem a little bit less shoot, you know what the word is. My alarm goes, but they're performing less optimal than they would normally be in that sense.
That's interesting because the way that I understood it, I'm breaking the lightning round format a little bit here, but I will do so since this was a blog post that I hadn't seen. So I had actually understood it as them raising a lot of the API limits, but only putting a restriction on the maximum number of users. And so Twitter has sort of framed this as, hey, for developers, we're giving you more calls, more usage of the API. We're just putting a maximum limit on the number of users that can use your system at any one time. They actually put it at 100,000 concurrent users, or 2x if you have an existing application that has more than 100,000 users. They will give you 2x that number. But for those users, you're actually able to access the API more frequently than you were before. So they're kind of saying, hey, we're giving you more, but we're putting an overall limit that didn't used to exist before. So it'll be interesting to dig in a little more and see, whether those API limits are going up, where they're going down, and how, again, developers respond. Because I think we're just starting to see developer reaction. And so over the next couple of weeks, as people understand a little more and read a little deeper into this announcement, I think we'll continue to see some interesting developments around how this is going to affect third-party clients.
And it's more technical than anything, but it still will have an interesting effect on how many options you'll have in the future when it comes to these tools that are connected to Twitter.
All right, so let's jump into the next one.
Go for it.
All right, so this is Instagram announcing a business blog, which, hey, that's awesome. I'm a big fan of this one. They're actually putting a focus on brands, and it's something that's always existed on the Instagram system, but it's nice to see them acknowledge it and actually create a blog to help people make the most of being a brand on Instagram. This is something we've seen Twitter do. This is something we've seen Facebook do. So it only makes sense that Instagram would say, hey, here's how to make the most of our system. But they actually shared best practices, which I think was awesome. This was one of the first blog posts that they made. And some of the best practices they highlight were change perspective, share compelling content, tell your story, expand your audience, post consistently, and engage with the community. All of which I would definitely recommend as well. Some of those we've even touched on in the past. Things like share compelling content. That's basically the have an image strategy that we've talked about a number of times on this show. So it's good to see Instagram stand behind those and say, hey, for brands that want to make the most of our service, here's how to do so.
I definitely heard the alarm that time. My turn?
Your turn. 60 seconds on the clock.
All right, here we go. I won't tell you I put 2 minutes on the clock. No, I'm just kidding. I think this is good, and you kind of stole my thunder in the sense that, or lightning as it might be, in the sense that you said that this is something that Twitter had done and Facebook had done, and pretty much any of the major players out there, LinkedIn as well, have done, where they finally have kind of got their foothold. They're not worried about getting users as much because they've kind of made it big, and now they're finally producing blog posts and things and putting together resources in order to let business users know that, hey, here's some great case studies, and here are some best practices on how to use our platform and so on. Because ultimately, it's great that users are using it, but when you're not charging for a service, you want to find ways to have really awesome partnerships with businesses and brands, and so that's the direction that it seems Instagram is starting to be ready to go.
All right, very nice. Oh, there we go. The buzzer sound.
Last one.
All right, last one. 60 seconds on the clock. Ready and go. So the last thing that we wanted to talk about was actually something that came out today. So we are bringing you the latest in Solomo news. This is Open Graph apps can now use inline tagging on the Facebook system. So for mobile applications that are using Open Graph data, Facebook is now going to allow them to actually pull in a user's friends and actually tag those inside of the application. So for instance, if you were using Instagram and you said, having a great time here with Adam, I could actually tag Adam, and when it gets shared to Facebook, it'll include Adam's Facebook profile. It's essentially solidifying a lot of these links, which I think is really positive. The thing that matters for brands is, in addition to tagging friends, you can also tag pages. So I could say, hey, enjoying this coffee at Starbucks, and that'll actually connect to the Starbucks brand page and push that into the Facebook system. I think this is really cool, and I actually am going to push this to you, Adam, and see, do you think brands should ask for the tag?
That brands should ask for the tag? Clarify what you mean by that.
Do you think, with this new feature, should you actively go out and say, hey, if you're using these third-party services, make sure to tag our page, or should you let it happen organically and just sort of take it as added value if somebody does feel good enough about your brand to include you in a tag?
So 2 things on that. One is, if you're going to ask, there's no problem with asking. I don't think that there's any problem with that at all. I think that when we saw tagging happening, it initially happened with just standard status updates at first, and that was pretty cool. And then eventually when they added it to comments, that was really, really cool. And it increases engagement a lot, because now you can actually pull other folks into the conversation instead of it being something that they had to somehow discover you were talking about them or referring to them. And again, brands, you could also refer to them as well on Facebook. So finally, to be able to do it on mobile applications, especially third-party applications where it's outside of the normal ecosystem, is awesome. It hopefully will increase the way, and maybe there's some creative ways developers can use this to increase the way that people engage and talk about your brand on other applications.
All right, well done. Well within the 60-second gap. And that concludes the lightning round. All right, so one of the things we promised earlier, want to make sure we circle back to, is actually giving people some action items, some things to do this week related to SEO, and actually diving into SEO and getting comfortable with the tools, playing around a little bit, and hopefully starting to make adjustments to the content you're creating or even your website itself to rank better inside of Google and other search engines. So Adam, what are some tips for the viewers and listeners that they can actually use to, start right away? If they're excited about what we talked about and they want to take advantage of it, what would you recommend people check out?
All right. So first and foremost, do a few searches and see related to your industry and content that you might know that you've produced, maybe a blog topic or 2 that you have, and see how you're showing up. Don't just search for your name. A lot of people do that where they're just searching for, Solomo Show. Oh my God, I'm number 1. Well, of course you're number 1. If anybody else is ranking higher than you with your own company name or your own product name, then you definitely have a problem. But for the most part, just search and see, are you coming up in an appetizing way on those search results? And if not, how can you adjust those those meta tags in order to look more appealing and to really represent what kind of content would be there when you click on it. Use the Google keyword tool that they have in order to see what kind of language are your customers actually using to find information related to your product or service or company. A lot of times we think about the jargon that we have in mind, but we don't think about the language that people are using to search for things. So you might actually find that although people are using that particular, that term that you're using, there may be something that's actually driving more traffic that is being used, but you're not actually using it in any of your content or creating content around that particular keyword. So it's always pretty important when it comes to whether it's a website or it's a blog or any sort of content marketing that you do some research with the keyword tool. And we're going to link to that so you can actually check it out. For blogs and other sites that actually have authored content with actual authors on it, like a blog post again, and there may be some other pages that you have which would be appropriate to reference an author of the particular piece of content. Take a look at the link that we have for the Google Authorship Markup or Google it, and take a look at how to implement that on the site. That's pretty important. So now you'll actually have those authors' faces being seen and socially on the search results. There's likely going to be a lot of other improvements that are going to happen over time with the authorship markup. You kind of talked about, I believe, the rich snippets a little bit, Corey. There's a link to the webmaster tools. The Google has, their whole slew of webmaster tools that you could take advantage of. And one section there is called rich snippets. And so that's like for a variety of types of content where instead of just the standard search result, you want to show actually something more rich. So for instance, if you sell music and you want to show off like your album list with a couple play buttons next to the MP3 so people can actually listen to the audio right there in a search result, or even recipes, for instance, so I have rich snippets where they're actually formatted differently within search results. You can actually test that out and see the different search result formats and test it and play with it and see and that's a place where you can use this tool to actually test the authorship markup. So I think Corey was talking about where he said you can't previously test it, and you likely, when Corey put it up, probably use the rich snippet tool to test it out, right?
Yep, definitely.
Okay, and then last but not least, I mean, really the most important thing is to just produce steady. It doesn't have to be every day, although if you do it every day, that's awesome, but steady quality content for human beings, not search engines. When you do it for the language that they want to read, that they're searching for and everything, you're going to rank better overall. And Google continues to move in that direction with what they're doing with their search engine. Remember, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So it's great that somebody might find you in search results, but when they click on that link and they come to your site and then the content on your page is misrepresented by those search results, then they're not likely gonna follow through with it. They may not stay on that page. So it's great to be found in a search engine, but in the end, you want to make sure that that content is really, really focused on the needs of the human beings that are going to eventually find their way to that web page.
And I'd also add the Google Webmaster Tools. This was something that we mentioned a couple times with the rich snippets, with the authorship checks. Google actually has a really full suite of webmaster tools. And so I think one of my big takeaways would be get familiar with Google's webmaster tools. There's a lot there. There's a lot of resources. There's a lot of actual tools. There's videos. There's written posts. Dig through some of that. Get familiar with the information that Google is sharing, because obviously Google is going to be the best source of information about what works inside of the Google system. The other thing the Webmaster Tools is great for is figuring out what's not working. So if your site has broken links, if Google's not able to crawl certain parts of it, they're open about that. They don't hide that data, but it all lives inside of this Google Webmaster Tools area. So make sure to check that. See if for some reason maybe Google can't crawl your entire store and you're a retail store and you're thinking, why aren't people finding me? I've got all this great content. I've got all these great products. It might just be that Google, for one reason or another, can't actually see inside of your store. The other thing to check is to make sure you've submitted a sitemap. So a sitemap is, like it sounds, a map of your site that tells Google, hey, over here's my store, here's my blog. The blog has all of these posts inside of it. It's basically a guide for Google. and Google will tell you, I've got a sitemap or I don't have a sitemap. So again, check that. You might think, oh, I've got a plugin that I installed inside of WordPress that should do that automatically. Make sure it's being received by Google and that it's not having any errors accessing that sitemap, because that's extremely important for giving Google the live and most accurate information about what exists on your website. So definitely check that out and dig around in there. There is a lot to play with, and it is super informative. So I recommend that highly.
So I hope you guys found some value in what we talked about today, and it was a little bit different than the average SEO discussion that you've heard on the web, or at least in the past, because things have changed quite a bit.
Yeah, indeed. And we covered a lot today, but as always, we would love to hear from you. So if you listen to this episode and you thought to yourself, there was a question I have about SEO that just didn't get answered, or hey, maybe you've got a suggested topic for a follow-up to this, we definitely encourage you to get in touch. So there's a number of ways you can do that. The first and probably easiest is via Twitter. So the show is available at SoloMo Show, or you can reach myself directly. I'm at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi.
You can also reach us via email. It's solomoshow@gmail.com.
And I always leave Corey hanging when I'm supposed to cover that part of the show. But we can also find us on Facebook. Just go ahead and search for Solomo Show on Facebook. Also on Google+. And we have a board on Pinterest where we put up all the YouTube versions of the episodes. And you can just click and repin to your heart's content and share with the folks that you're connected with on Pinterest.
There we go. And all the links that we discussed today, as well as links to the social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes, which are available at solomoshow.com or in your podcast player of choice. And again, we want to thank the audience, both for listening and especially those of you that have gone out and rated the show in iTunes. We appreciate that, and we encourage those of you that haven't had a chance to rate the show in iTunes to go out and do so. It only takes a minute, but hey, it helps with our search engine optimization as well, so we encourage that.
I see what you did there, Corey.
See what I did? I wrapped it all. I brought it all back. All right. And with that, we will call this show a wrap, and we hope that you come back next week to join us for another great episode of The Solomo Show.
Take care.